Well, welcome everyone. Halako kwe, Hawisiye no lako. My name is Ashley Nicole Engle. I am absentee Shawnee tribe of Oklahoma. I'm also Oglala and Chichangu Lakota, and I work for the Indigenous Environmental Network as their Green New Deal organizer. I am joined today by Jaron Browne from the Grassroots Global Justice Alliance and Yong Cho from the Green New Deal Network. We're really grateful that you chose our room to join us here today. I'm just going to go ahead and frame this moment and say, you know, the Green New Deal is for you. It's for everybody. The truth is what the situation that has unfolded over the past couple of weeks really indicates that this settler system is not working. Not only are we faced with combating white supremacy and dealing through this economic crisis, we're also seeing a really terrible response to the global pandemic. But it's not enough to say that we're fighting fascism. The beast ahead of us is just as difficult and just as arduous. And that is the beast of neoliberalism. And so this is why, you know, our different groups have come together using a diversity of tactics ranging from congressional efforts and federal policy like the Thrive Agenda, all the way to locking down through nonviolent direct action on the front lines. So again, I just want to reiterate, the Green New Deal is for you. It is about systems change, and it is about moving towards a just transition for true justice. I just want to remind everyone that we're really hoping that this room can be interactive. And we will have information for you to sign up so that you can get linked in. But we're going to go ahead and start by asking you what brought you to this room today. So if you want to go ahead and add your comments into the sidebar, we'll go ahead and get started with a short video. Thank you.
Challenged as humankind has never been challenged before.
We know the dangerous catastrophic effects of
climate crisis,
the corporate greed of the fossil fuel industry,
COVID-19, high rates of unemployment,
trying to pay off my student debt
while dealing with racial and gender injustice.
This is why we must pass the Thrive Agenda.
It's time to transform, heal, and renew by investing in vibrant economies.
Because it's high time that our federal government implement a just recovery to support Black, Indigenous,
working class, and immigrant communities.
These same communities are home to frontline workers who are getting sick and dying at a higher rate than anyone else.
We need to see jobs created that support frontline workers
so that we can continue to work while our loved ones are being taken care of while they're the most vulnerable.
Our communities deserve to be healthy. We deserve jobs with living wages.
We need to build things in America again
in a way that isn't going to exploit the environment.
The Thrive Agenda retrains those who will be put out of the fossil fuel industry.
We have the resources, but we must bring them all together and make the connection between climate and the economy and race.
The Thrive Agenda moves us towards justice, sustainability, and right relationship with our Earth.
Support Thrive if you want green transit, green infrastructure.
We would be able to create millions of good-paying jobs.
Unionized, high-paying, clean energy jobs.
Clean air.
Clean, safe, affordable drinking water.
And the further strengthening of our union rights.
Those most in need cannot be an afterthought.
We need a sustainable way to do our work.
And I need my children and my children's children
to have a safe and healthy world.
Based on solidarity, cooperation, and self-determination here in Jackson, Mississippi.
Here in New York City.
Baltimore.
Inez, Kentucky.
Lansing, Michigan.
New Orleans.
Salt Lake City.
San Diego, California.
Here in my home of Alaska.
On Yoka territory, known as Fresno, California.
In Miami, Florida.
That's what the Thrive Act symbolizes for me, empowerment for all oppressed communities here in America.
We have the power and the ability to create together and help people across the country get behind that vision as well.
To me, the Thrive Agenda says, "T'ishku nechidnu." We are working as one.
We are.
Thank you so much for sharing for that video. I guess I want to specifically just honor the work of Survival Media and all of our different members, frontline members who sent in those videos as we launched the Thrive Agenda. That was our campaign launch video from just a couple of months ago. And I want to thank you all for being here, for choosing this breakout, because as Ashley said in the beginning, we feel like this is a critical campaign that connects to all of our frontline movements for tenant organizers, for racial justice organizers, folks working on grassroots feminism, and of course, environmental and climate justice. All of that is connected for us and what we're building as a shared campaign around the Green New Deal. So I want to mention as I start here that also there's a sidebar that we were mentioning to kind of put comments. I think specifically it's a second tab that says questions and answers, whereas you write in your comments and your questions, we're going to come back to those at the end, and we have a way that that's all getting captured. And I guess to open this up, we wanted to specifically honor that this event today was called On the Front Lines. And for us in the environmental justice movement, frontline is actually an incredibly powerful term. We often talk about the frontline movement in environmental and climate justice as those communities who are hit hardest by the dangerous and deadly impacts of this extractive economy. So we're the communities that are overwhelmingly Indigenous peoples, Black folks, Latinx, Asian and Pacific Islander communities, and rural working class white communities across the country, where we find refineries, we find fracking wells, we live in communities with pipelines trying to cross our waterways, we live with incinerators in our backyard, and so our children often have asthma. We live in areas that are referred to as cancer clusters, and some have referred to these areas as basically sacrifice zones. And if you live in one of these communities that's been a sacrifice zone, you can put that in that question and answer so we could see who's a part of this conversation today. But this photo here that's from the 2014 climate march, was that banner that we marched under, is that we're not just the front lines of the crisis, we're also the communities that are on the forefront of change. And that's particularly true because what we see is that our communities have also been the ones who've been foregrounding the solutions for many years to how we take on the most significant and existential crisis that we've been facing as humanity, which we're in right now. And that aspect of the climate crisis, we know it shows up in our everywhere right now, with floods, with wildfires, the devastating impacts of the climate crisis. But it's also the root cause of it is tied to how our entire economy and our energy system is built on the burning of fossil fuels, is built on an economy that is driving the very nature of the crisis. And so the vision that we talk about in the frontline movements, we talk about the idea of just transition, that if we actually can address this crisis, but in order to do it, we have to look at the economy as a whole. So we've built the United Frontline Table, which is the Rising Majority is a part of, and it's part of what brings us together here today, because we see that all of our communities together can aggregate our power, can come together and can build a collective movement for genuine system change that takes on the full nature of the climate crisis, but also builds for fundamental solutions and invests in the kind of community that we want to see. It invests in an economy that is anti-racist, that is regenerative, that is a feminist economy that centers life. And so today what we're going to focus on is trying to make sure that everyone in this breakout group understands the ecosystem of social movements who are working on this Green New Deal campaign. So I've been speaking about the United Frontline Table and our sign up that we shared with you, the bit.ly/Martin 2021 is a way to sign up for all of you to get involved in the United Frontline Table. And I'm going to now pass it to Jung Cho, who's going to also talk about the Green New Deal Network, because all of us together are actually part of a broad ecosystem of movements that are advancing a strong campaign to move us forward in this period. So thanks, I'm going to pass to Jung.
Thank you, Jaron. Thank you, Ashley. And thank you all so much for being here. I'm really grateful to be in this fight with you all. So the Green New Deal Network is a 50-state campaign. At the national level, the coalition is made up of 15 membership-based organizations, including the Climate Justice Alliance, Center for Popular Democracy, Indivisible, Movement for Black Lives, Sierra Club, SEIU, Sunrise Movement, and many more. Nationally, statewide, and locally, we're building powerful coalitions to win Green New Deal type policies at every level. Federally, our primary campaign is the Thrive Agenda. Thrive is actually an acronym that stands for Transform, Heal, Renew by Investing in a Vibrant Economy. And it is a bold economic recovery plan to address the intersecting crises facing us today. And before we go into some of the details of what the timeline looks like and the details of the Thrive Agenda broadly, just want to bring up some of the conversations that came up in the main plenary session and what Ashley brought up when she opened the space, which is that we are, in a moment of contradiction. There is emboldened white supremacist violence and the COVID pandemic. It is an incredibly painful and scary time. And on the other hand, we saw historic uprisings for racial justice, and we have some hope in this new political environment, particularly with the wins in the Georgia elections as a result of decades of organizing and campaigns, mostly led by Black women. And we're sort of right in the middle. There are real opportunities with this new administration and a democratically controlled Congress. So we can push and pass some bold, ambitious policies at the federal level. I know it's like scary to be hopeful, and it's not going to be easy, but I want us to sort of lean into that and be ready for that fight because the opportunity is there. The margins are slim. We all know that. We have slim margins in the House, and the Senate is a tie. So what it's going to take is what we already know: continuous grassroots organizing. President-elect Biden and Democrats in Congress and some moderate Republicans need to be pushed on bold, visionary policies that we need. And so many of us worked tirelessly for the election in November and for the runoff. So we cannot waste this critical moment by assuming our elected leaders will do the right thing. I think many of us are like, that's in the past. We are going to hold our leaders accountable. So just some sense on the timeline. This fight for economic recovery, climate, jobs is just around the corner. We know that pretty soon that the fight around COVID relief is imminent. And then soon after that, there's going to be an intense debate around economic recovery. So our window is in the first 100 days of the Biden administration to shape the debate on the solutions to climate, economic, environmental, and inequality crises. So that's why the Thrive Agenda is so important and where the Thrive Agenda comes in. So the Thrive Agenda is a unity agenda, and it is rooted in 8 core pillars. I'll just read the first 4 of them. The first is creating millions of good, safe jobs with access to unions. 2, building the power of workers to fight inequality. 3, investing in Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities. 4, strengthening and healing the nation-to-nation relationship with sovereign Native nations. I'm going to pass it to Ashley for the final 4.
5, combating environmental injustice and ensuring healthy lives for all. 6, averting climate and environmental catastrophe. 7, ensuring the fairness for workers and communities impacted by economic transitions. And 8, reinvesting in public institutions that enable workers and communities to thrive.
So the Thrive Agenda isn't the Green New Deal in its totality. The Green New Deal is not one single policy or a single piece of legislation, but a framework. And we want the Thrive Agenda to be the first step, as Ashley had mentioned, on a decade-long journey. So if you're committed to the fight for a Green New Deal for all of us, this is the fight in the federal arena. And the Thrive Agenda was introduced as a resolution last year with grassroots leaders and Congresswoman Deb Haaland, Senator Markey, and Senator Schumer. It gained over 100 congressional co-sponsors and 300 organizational endorsements. You can see if your member of Congress signed on to the Thrive Agenda by going to greennewdealnetwork.com's campaign page. I'll just make one note that when we launched the Thrive Agenda, Senator Schumer said, quote, "I make this pledge. If God willing, I become majority leader next year, you can be sure we'll make it a top priority to pass just economic renewal bill, following the principles of Thrive to confront climate change, economic inequality, and racial justice." Senator Schumer said this publicly in September 2020. So now we have the opportunity to hold him accountable to his public commitments. This is amazing. So, just to wrap the section around Thrive, in the next few weeks, Congress will propose a major recovery and jobs bill. It's either going to put us on the path towards a Green New Deal or it won't. So there's a lot of work ahead, and I look forward to working with all of you on this fight.
So yeah, thank you, Jung and Jaron, for sharing all of that. So now that we've kind of maneuvered through the ecosystem of what the Green New Deal looks like, not only at the federal level, but also on the ground, I just wanted to give a little bit of a framing where Indigenous Environmental Network and our relatives in the United Frontline table are approaching the Green New Deal, and that is through the Indigenous principles of just transition. And as you can see them listed here, these are natural law, Indigenous lifeways, sovereignty, and into false solutions and mechanisms, free, prior, informed consent, rights of nature, and land back. And you can find more about that on our website, inearth.org. But really what we're trying to get at here is that Indigenous people are uniquely positioned on this land to guide us through these crises, because we really do have a roadmap outside of a colonial system toward a just transition to a regenerative economy. And so it's really important that we, uplift our Indigenous, our Black relatives, and our other BIPOC relatives in these conversations. But of course, we are always being led by our front lines. And so here you can see some of our pictures, some of our relatives who are fighting current fights right now, every single day at Keystone Pipeline, Keystone XL, which is what we call the zombie pipeline. We've defeated it numerous times, but we still need help to really shut it down for good. Dakota Access Pipeline is still an imminent issue. And really the huge fight that's happening right now that really needs all eyes on them is the Stop Line 3 fight happening up north with our relatives, our Ojibwe relatives. And it's really important to recognize that, again, it does take a diversity of tactics and strategies to really achieve our ends. And it's really important, as Yong said, that we hold our elected leaders accountable. We hold those in positions of power accountable, because the time is far behind us where we accept platitudes, where we accept false promises, and where we wait on standby for our leaders to give us the things that we've been demanding. And so go ahead and move to the next slide. One of the huge campaigns that IEN and many of our relatives in the United Frontline table and at the Green New Deal Network are involved in is a campaign called Build Back Fossil Free. We're definitely inviting you to plug in as well. There's a space for everybody at this table. As you can see, there are over 100 organizations on the front lines who are being represented in this space. And what it is, it's a bold, progressive left flank of the environmental justice movement. And again, it's really about that first 100 days of setting the tone for real progressive movement in the environmental justice space. And so we are demanding that Biden use executive action to protect and invest in the Black, Indigenous, Brown, and working class communities. And to end the era of fossil fuel production, we want to keep fossil fuels in the ground. And finally, to launch a national climate mobilization to build back fossil free that will deliver jobs, justice, and opportunity for all. And so these are the many ways that you can plug in right now. And I encourage you to go ahead and go to these websites and sign up. But we'll go ahead and pass it on to the next slide and wrap up and move to question and answers.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Yes, we've been gathering the comments and questions. If you haven't put some in, please add something there in that second tab. But we just wanted to encourage people most of all, as we move into this last section, to sign up on our United Frontline website. And so if, it's something you have to type into your computer, that bit.ly/Martin 2021. You could do it on your phone if you could access it that way. But we want to stay connected to people because this is an extremely active campaign that is 2021. We are going to see actions in all 50 states and territories, major organizing happening in Alaska. We're connected with folks in Puerto Rico and Micronesia. So this is a time we want to make sure we have everybody connected. And so as we kind of move to our last time, we wanted to just take a minute and read out some of what's been shared from you all. And we wish we were here in person somewhere where you could speak these things yourselves, but we just want to speak into the room what's been added from the chat. And we're going to set a few different questions forward, and then we'll just try to answer what we can, but also just share both the questions and the comments that came in. So what I'm seeing here is there's questions about, in general, there's a question from a local organizer in Boston wanting to connect in, and we do have tables that are getting formed in local organizations all across the country who are part of this campaign. So we'll make sure to link you with that those local organizations. There's a political question about for beginning organizers, you know, how to begin to advance this work in their communities. Folks are asking, somebody asked, what's the most important way to spend time in order to get the Green New Deal passed? What are the most important kinds of activities that we want to encourage people to do? And I don't know also if my other facilitators here can see the document, if there's any of these that you want to pick out to read, just to bring these voices in. Let's see, and because I just want to make sure we kind of may not be able to get to all the questions. But there's someone who also said, I volunteer with a small direct action organization working on the climate crisis. Do you have advice for how to balance having a very specific target, in our case, our local utility, while working to be in solidarity with the larger movement? So that's a really concrete question that we could get to. And then there's also just some questions about where to find the information later, where to find information about Thrive and other campaigns. So, so maybe we'll start there and see if there's, because also I don't know, we don't have too much time, but I wanted to see if maybe we start with Ashley and then Jung.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you. And thank you everybody for, adding your comments and adding your questions in the sidebar. I'll take that whole suite of questions and I'll say, the question about the local organizing and, how do you balance that like fight, that local fight and, plug it into like the larger fights that are happening on a national level. And for me, I live in Muskogee Creek territory, also known as so-called Oklahoma, where we are pipeline crossroads of the world. And we do have, a very red politic here in this state. And so, very often I personally do find myself advocating or fighting on that very, very local level. But one thing that I always like to remind folks who, feel disheartened or feel, really, beat down is that the truth is the front lines are everywhere. And what we really, really need folks to do is to find that front line in their backyard and to advocate locally. Because until we completely dismantle this system, we're going to keep having these Keystone XL fights. We're going to keep having these Stop Line 3 fights. We're going to keep fighting pipelines like the Dakota Access Pipeline. And so what we really need our folks out there to do is to stop what they're doing right where they're at and to really get to work in their own backyard. And that's the best way to stand in solidarity with these larger fights. And of course, sharing out media, linking in your local hashtags with these Stop Line 3 fights is a good way to bring those conversations into the same space. And that's really a good way to advocate moving forward. As far as what I would suggest, for folks who are just starting out in this Green New Deal atmosphere, really for me in Oklahoma, it's a hard far right state. Oil and gas is our only singular economy. But one of the conversations that I found really useful to have those and create those very unlikely alliances is to really talk about the economic justice that really is around the Green New Deal. Because here, pipeline people are losing their jobs every single day, and people are struggling to keep a roof over their head and food on the table. But with this just transition, where we can train up these same workers to move over to a sustainable, regenerative economy, we'll be able to ensure that people like Oklahomans, people in North Dakota, people from coast to coast will be put to work for many generations to come. And so I'd say, really advocating on that local level is so important, but also advocating on that federal level, hitting up your congressperson, letting them know that this is an issue that is important to you is a way to make our job easier when we're advocating in those federal spaces. And so that's, just kind of some of my ideas on the questions that were put forth. And I just want to say, Niawe to everybody, and I'll go ahead and kick it over to Jung.
Thank you, Ashley. Yeah, I don't have another answer for what you shared around the front lines are everywhere and there are fights in your backyard, and getting involved locally is really important. I think it's also because we know that we're in this fight for ourselves and the people that we love and community. I know it's really hard with the pandemic, but what keeps us going is one another. And so, on this call, we shared networks like the United Frontline Table, the Green New Deal Network, Indigenous Environmental Network, Build Back Fossil Free. And these are all networks of membership-based organizations that might have a local group in your area. And if there isn't, then there are ways to get involved and actions to take nationally or even statewide. And so definitely, find an organization in your area to get involved, or I know it's kind of a high bar, but it's also not. You can create one, or a chapter, like getting 3 friends and coming together to win local Green New Deal type policies, and also getting involved on the federal Thrive Agenda campaign. The other sort of very specific question that I'm seeing from the Q&A is that if your rep has already signed on to the Thrive resolution, what other focus actions would you suggest? There was a bunch of campaigns that was shared on this call, but I'd also say specifically around Thrive, if your member of Congress has supported, sharing some encouragement and appreciation some thanks is also really helpful, because it'll keep, not only do we need to be holding our electeds accountable to the vision that we want, but we also are in partnership with them as well. And so just showing that we are in this together on these specific fights will make sure that we are building a strong coalition. So if your rep is already signed on, just some encouragement saying, hey, I see you, this is exactly what we need, please fight harder for this, will go a really long way. And I will pass it to Jaron.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we're about to close. I just want to lift up, there were so many great questions, and so we'll follow up with everyone who also included their contact info there. Somebody said that on the bit.ly link, it didn't exactly work. So I know those are a little complicated. So I just want to mention, if you actually are just looking for the website, it's unitedfrontlinetable.org. So that's United Frontline Table, that full long word, .org, and you can sign up there. The Green New Deal Network also has a website, and all of our alliances through IEN, you can also connect in. And the last question I wanted to speak to, because there's so many amazing organizers on this call, that local work, fighting the local utility, fighting your local pipeline, that's where our power lies. And so as we build this movement, like Ashley was saying, like Jung was saying, this isn't a short-term campaign. Really what we're building fundamentally is a vision of how we want to fight and rebuild for the kind of economy we need. And so that's where we talk about it as system change, but what we're building and the kind of organizing we're doing now, there was a question, how do I succinctly explain the Green New Deal? And I would say it's about how we take and divest from the parts of our economy that are killing our people, that are harming us, and we invest in building the kind of economy we need to be in right relationship with each other and right relationship with the earth. So I think we have to close there, but thank you all so much, and we'll be definitely looking forward to staying connected.